I had carried the seal for 107 years. That is not a figure I speak aloud, not even to my council. It is simply the count that lives behind my sternum, precise and permanent as the relic itself. 107 years of pressing my palm to the silver disk at dawn, feeling nothing, then setting my jaw and going about the business of ruling Valethorn. 107 years of watching the seal sit in its iron box on my bedside table, silent as bone, as dark as a moonless canyon, while my advisors produced daughters of northern lords and southern merchant kings, and once, memorably, a woman from across the Dren Sea whose hair was the color of embers and who had traveled 6 weeks because someone told her the seal would choose her. It did not. None of them. Not a flicker, not a tremor. The seal was said to have been forged at the founding of the pact between the Wolf Kingdoms and the Old Order, the binding that kept the deep darkness, the creature my ancestors had named only the Hallowed God, pressed beneath the roots of the Varath Range. As long as the seal held, the Hallowed God slept. As long as I carried it, it retained its power. But the old texts were clear. The seal's full strength, the strength that would outlast me, that would endure past any single king's life, required its chosen keeper. Not the Alpha King. A woman. The seal's true match, and when she touched it, the bond between them and between her and the king who carried it would ignite together, 2 flames from one source. I had stopped believing she existed somewhere around year 40. By year 60, I had quietly rearranged my expectations. By year 107, I was tired in a way that has no good name, not broken. A king of Valethorn does not break, but tired. It was my wolf who insisted on the disguise. My wolf had been for nearly a century the quieter and more patient of us. He did not howl at the seal's silence the way I did in the early years. He did not pace the hall in the dark. He simply waited the way a very old wolf waits, stretched at the back of the mind, warm, certain of something he could not explain. When I told my council I intended to walk among the mountain pass villages in disguise, as a wandering elder, a simple man, a traveler with a bad leg and no obvious rank, they looked at me the way men look at their king when they believe he has finally cracked beneath the weight of something and are too politic to say so. My captain of the guard, a gray-bearded wolf named Osric who had served 3 generations of my line, said only, "My lord, the mountain passes are cold this season." "Yes," I said, "they are." I had tried queens. I had tried bloodlines and pedigrees and women recommended by oracles. I had not tried this, walking into the world as no one, carrying the seal under a traveling cloak, and seeing what the seal felt when no one was performing for it. I left Seldreth Keep on the first morning of the early snow, a pack on my back and a carved walking stick in my hand, and the seal, wrapped in oilcloth, pressed against my ribs. I wore Corin the Elder's face, not a mask, simply the posture of age, the bent shoulders, the slow step, the manner of a man who has walked a great many miles and carries no particular importance in the world. My wolf settled low and watchful beneath the disguise. He had not been this alert in years. I visited 4 villages in 11 days. In the first, I ate at the common table and watched the seal and felt nothing. In the second, a young woman brought me soup and told me about her betrothal, and the seal slept. In the third, I stayed 2 nights in the healer's cottage because the snow came down in the dark, and I could not see the road, and the healer was a kind man who smelled of dried yarrow, and still the seal sat against my ribs like cold iron. I was beginning to think Osric had been right about the mountain passes. The 5th village was called Threnwick. It sat above a bend in the Varath Road, 6 stone buildings and a mill and a market square no bigger than my private study, and I arrived at its edge on a Thursday morning when the snow had stopped, and the sky was the color of iron shavings, and the cold was the kind that gets into the knuckle joints and stays. I was not particularly hopeful about Threnwick. It was small. It was quiet. There was a crow on the gate post who looked at me with what I can only describe as professional skepticism. The thing that caught my attention first was the wolves. There were 3 of them, pack wolves, large, the kind that ran with the outer range sentinels rather than as companions, sitting in the market square with the patient, settled posture of animals who had been there long enough to feel at home. They were not tethered. They were simply there, in a loose half-circle around the base of a stone well, watching a woman draw water. She was not watching them. She was watching the bucket, her attention on the rope, one boot up on the well's low stone lip for balance, her breath making small clouds in the cold air. She wore a healer's apron, the deep blue of it gone soft at the edges from washing over a plain gray dress, and her hair was pinned up in the unceremonious way of a woman who does not spend time on her hair in the morning, because she has things to accomplish before the light is good. She was not young in the way of the Lord's daughters I had been presented with, polished and positioned and fully conscious of being observed. She was perhaps 30, perhaps a little past, with the hands of a woman who worked in all seasons and the settled posture of someone who had decided what she believed about the world and did not need anyone to confirm it for her. She finished drawing the water. Then, without looking at the wolves, she said, "You're going to make Aldous nervous if you sit there all morning." One of the wolves, the largest, with a torn ear, flicked that ear in her direction. "He's the miller," she said, as if explaining something to someone of moderate intelligence. "He worries. Go sit by the north wall instead. There's sun on it this time of morning." All three wolves stood, shook themselves, and moved to the north wall. I stood at the edge of the market square with my walking stick and my pack, and something happening in my chest that I did not immediately have a name for. My wolf, who had been very still for 11 days, lifted his head. I went to find the inn. Threnwick's Inn was also Threnwick's General Goods Exchange, and on alternating Fridays, the location of what the innkeeper called a lending library, which appeared to consist of 6 books stacked on a shelf above the bread oven. The innkeeper was a stout man named Perwick who gave me a room on the 2nd floor without any particular interest in who I was or where I had come from, which suited me. I ate a bowl of oat porridge and asked, because it was the natural question for a weary traveler with a sore leg, whether there was a healer in the village. "There's Sira," Perwick said, refilling my cup without being asked. "She's the one, cottage at the east end of the lane, blue door. She'll charge you a fair price and not a grain more, and she won't make you feel stupid about what you've done to your leg." "Does she see many travelers?" "She sees everyone," he said simply. "There's not a soul in this village, wolf or otherwise, who hasn't sat in that chair by her fire at least once. Even old Radwick, and he hasn't let anyone touch his joints in 20 years. She talked him into it inside a week of arriving." He said it with the comfortable pride of someone discussing a neighbor they genuinely approve of. "Came here 3 years ago from somewhere in the Southern Holdings. She doesn't talk much about why. Doesn't need to. She does her work and she's good at it, and the wolves like her, which around here matters more than a letter of introduction." "The wolves like her." My wolf stirred again, very slightly, the way he did sometimes when I was on the edge of understanding something he had already understood. I finished my porridge. I walked to the east end of the lane. The blue door was exactly as described. There was a bundle of dried lavender hung above it, and a small wooden sign that said simply "Healer" in letters that had been painted carefully but not professionally. Someone who had done it themselves, who cared about legibility more than elegance. I knocked. The woman who opened the door was the woman from the well. Up close she was more herself than she had been at a distance, if that makes any sense, more particular, more specific. Brown eyes with a quality of attention in them that I recognized, because I saw it in my best commanders and my oldest advisors, the quality of someone who looks at a thing and actually sees it rather than simply waiting for their own thoughts to resume. There was a small scar on the back of her left hand, pale and old. Her healer's apron was the same soft blue one, freshly tied. She looked at me, at old Corin the elder, bent-backed and travel-worn with that attention, and she said, "Come in then, mind the step." The cottage was warm. It smelled of yarrow and something sweeter, clover honey perhaps, and dried pine, and the clean mineral smell of the stone fireplace where a low fire was burning. It was a working space. There were dried plants hanging from the ceiling beams and glass jars along the windowsill, and a mortar and pestle on the central worktable that had clearly been in use that morning. But it was also unmistakably a home. There was a braided rug on the floor that had been repaired in 2 places. There was a cracked ceramic mug on the mantelpiece that someone had loved too much to throw away. There was a book open, face down, on the chair near the fire, holding its place. She gestured me toward the other chair, the one that was clearly for patients, set close to the fire and angled for easy access. And I sat, leaning my walking stick against the armrest, and for the first time in 11 days I felt the seal shift against my ribs. Not blaze, not ignite. Just shift the way a sleeping animal shifts when something disturbs its dream. She was pulling on her examination gloves. "Your leg," she said. "Which one and how long?" "Left several weeks." I had practiced this, the old injury, the plausible limp, the story of a fall on the Varath road. I told it. She listened without interrupting, which was not common. Most people, when you tell them something, are busy preparing their response. She was simply listening. "Let me see it," she said. I rolled up the left trouser leg. She crouched and looked, and she did not touch anything yet, which told me she understood the difference between examining and assuming. Her eyes went to the knee, then the ankle, then back. "You've been walking on this too long," she said. "The swelling's old. You've been managing it on the road without stopping." I had places to be. Everyone who does damage to their joints says that. She was already moving to the work table, reaching for something. "The honest truth is that walking on it accelerates the damage, and you'll be managing a much worse injury in 3 years if you don't let it rest properly now." She said this without judgment, simply as a fact she was offering me for my own use. "I can pack it with a drawing poultice that should take the heat out by tomorrow morning. I'd recommend staying in Threnwick 2 nights minimum. Perwick's rates are fair." "He mentioned you." She glanced over her shoulder. "He mentions everyone to everyone. It's how he keeps the village connected." She said it with something warm in her voice, not indulgent, simply fond. "He's been here 40 years, he knows every thread." She came back with the poultice and a length of linen wrap, and she crouched again, and she worked with the efficient, careful hands of someone who had done this 10,000 times and had not grown careless about it. The fire cracked. Outside, I could hear the wind finding the eaves. "You're not from these mountains," she said. Not an accusation, just observation. "No. The south. Further." She did not push. She simply continued rapping, her fingers sure and even, and the seal beneath my cloak was warmer than it had been in a decade. Warm enough now that I could feel it clearly against my ribs, rather than simply knowing intellectually that it was there. "The wolves in the square," I said after a moment. "Do they belong to someone?" "They belong to themselves," she said without hesitation. "They come in from the range sometimes when the weather turns. Aldous the miller gets nervous because he worries they'll disturb the grain stores, but they never have. They mostly just sit." She tied the linen with a small, neat knot. "I started putting out water for them last winter during the cold snap. After that, they seemed to decide the village was all right." My wolf, deep in my chest, made the sound he made almost never, a low, resonant exhale of recognition. The sound of a very old and patient animal putting something down that he has been carrying a long time. I stayed 2 nights, as she suggested. I did not intend for more to happen. I intended to observe the seal's response. The warmth had startled me, but warmth was not blazing, and I had been startled before and then continue north to the remaining villages on my list. I told myself this on the first evening when I found myself walking back down the lane toward the blue door on the pretext of asking whether she had something for a headache. She did. She gave me a small packet of willow bark and did not charge me for it. And when I thanked her, she waved it away with the manner of someone for whom small generosities are simply the operating principle of the day, rather than an occasion for acknowledgement. On the second morning, I was in the market square when she came out to refill the water bowl she had set for the range wolves. And one of them, the torn-eared one, walked directly to her and pressed its large head against her knee. And she put her hand on it without breaking her step, casual and certain as if this were simply the expected shape of a morning. I was standing 12 feet away. The seal blazed. Not the warmth I had felt in her cottage, not the faint shift of something waking. This was heat, sudden, clear, unmistakable, pressing out from the relic against my ribs with a force I had never felt in 107 years. And my wolf rose in my chest with it, fully present for the first time in longer than I could measure. And I stood in the market square of Threnwick in the morning cold, and understood that the search was over, and I did not quite know what to do with that. She had not looked at me yet. She was talking to the wolf. "You've got something in that ear," she told it, with mild professional concern. "Come by the cottage later and I'll look at it properly." The wolf's tail moved once slowly, side to side. She straightened, picked up her empty bowl, and turned, and found me standing 12 feet away, and did not startle, only looked at me with that steady attention of hers. "Good morning," she said. "How's the knee?" "Better," I said. "Good, rest it today?" She shifted the bowl under her arm. "There's a bench on the south side of the mill if you want somewhere warm to sit for a few hours. Aldous won't mind." She walked away. The wolves watched her go. The seal against my ribs was still blazing, quieter now, but certain, absolutely certain, the way a compass needle is certain of north. I pressed my palm against it through the fabric of my cloak, and for the first time in 107 years, the relic pressed back. I went to Perwick's common room and sat with my tea and thought about what I was going to do. I had expected the seal to choose someone. I had expected relief. I had not expected, and here I must be honest with myself, as a king must occasionally be even when it is inconvenient, to find myself thinking about the way she had put her hand on the wolf's head. The complete absence of performance in it. The way she talked to the range wolves as if they were people with reasonable concerns about the miller's nerves. The cracked mug on her mantelpiece that she had kept. The book held open, with her reading chair like something loved. My wolf was not troubled by any of this. He was, if anything, insufferably calm. He had been waiting for this. I had not known I was waiting for this. I had thought I was waiting for the seal to be satisfied, and the kingdom to be secured, and the century-long ache behind my sternum to resolve. I had not understood that those things and this thing were the same. That evening I went back to the cottage. My pretext this time was the walking stick. I told her the ferrule had cracked on the road, and I had heard she sometimes did small repairs, which was a complete invention but plausible enough in a village where the healer was also the person who knew where everything was and how to find it. She looked at the ferrule. She said she could fix it with a length of copper banding she had from a broken jar lid, and would I like to wait? I said I would like to wait. She worked at the bench by the window, her back half turned to me, the small sounds of the repair filling the room alongside the fire. The torn-eared wolf was in the cottage. She had apparently looked at its ear earlier, because there was a small clean dressing on it, and the wolf was stretched out near the hearth with the absolute boneless contentment of an animal that has been taken care of and knows it. "You've been in this area a while," she said without looking up from the ferrule. It was not quite a question. "Longer than I planned. The mountains have that effect." She turned the stick, examining her work. "I came through here on my way somewhere else 3 years ago. I haven't gone yet. Are you still planning to?" She was quiet for a moment. The fire settled. "I don't know," she said at last, and it was the first thing she had said that carried any weight, not deflection, simply the honest shape of a question she had not resolved. "I was running from something when I came through. Whatever I was running from seems less important from here." I did not ask what she had been running from. It was not my place, not as Corin the Elder. But my wolf turned the information over, the way he turned over things that mattered, slowly and completely. "What keeps you?" I asked. She set the walking stick down on the bench and turned and looked at me. The lamplight was behind her and the firelight was in front of her, and for a moment she was very clearly the woman she was, the woman the seal knew. The woman who had put water out for range wolves in the cold snap and called them by informal titles and kept cracked mugs she loved. And she said simply, "The people here need someone." My wolf made that sound again, the resonant exhale. I took the stick home. She had done excellent work with the copper banding, and lay in Perwick's upper room and stared at the low ceiling and knew I could not leave tomorrow. I did not examine this too closely. I simply knew it. On the third morning, the snow came back. It was not a gentle snow. It came in from the north with the specific intention of the mountain weather that has been waiting politely for several days, and has decided to stop. By mid-morning, the road out of Threnwick was buried to the first post markers, and Perwick went around the inn in a satisfied way, telling everyone their plans had changed, and Threnwick settled into itself the way small communities do in deep snow, turning inward, drawing toward common warmth, the rhythms of the day compressing into the available hours of gray light. She came to the inn at midday with a basket of supplies for old Radwick, who lived above the general goods exchange, and could not manage the stairs in the snow. She set the basket on the common table and started sorting through it, checking she had not forgotten anything, and I was sitting 2 tables away with a book I was not reading, and she looked up and saw me and said, "Still here, then?" "The road," I said. Yes, she found what she was looking for in the basket and tucked it into its place. "Perwick makes a very good potato soup on snow days. You should stay for lunch." "I'll stay for lunch," I said. She smiled briefly, a sideways thing not performed, and went back to sorting the basket. We ate lunch at the common table with Perwick and 2 of the village's older women, and she told a story about a goat that had gotten into her herb stores the previous spring with such a complete and unsentimental account of the damage that the older women were laughing before the end, and I felt something in my chest that it took me a moment to identify because I had not felt it in a very long time. Ease, uncomplicated warmth, the sense of being in the right place. A king does not often feel he is in the right place. He feels he is in the necessary place, the required place, the place where his presence serves the kingdom's needs. They are not the same thing. After lunch, she said she was going back to the cottage, and I said, with the directness of a man who has decided to stop pretending he has pretexts, that I would walk with her if she did not mind the company. She looked at me for a moment, that direct, assessing look, and said, "The snow's deep on the lane." "I have a good walking stick," I said. "Someone repaired the ferrule." Her mouth curved again, that sideways thing. "All right, then." We walked through the snow. The village was very quiet, the way deep snow makes things quiet, the sound absorbed and softened into something close to peace. She carried her basket. I carried my walking stick. The range wolves were nowhere in sight, sensibly sheltered, she said, probably in the old stone sheepfold at the north edge of the village which they had adopted 2 winters past, and no one had seen any reason to object to. At her door she stopped and turned to look at me. "Corin," she said. She said it with the careful deliberateness of someone choosing their words precisely. "I don't know what you're looking for in Threnwick. I don't ask that of anyone who comes through, but whatever it is," she paused, "I hope you find it." The seal beneath my cloak was blazing. "I think I already have," I said. She looked at me for a long moment with those steady eyes, and I do not know what she read in my face, in old Corin the elder's face, bent and weathered and carrying no obvious importance, but something she saw there made her very still. Then she said, "Would you like to come in out of the cold?" "Yes," I said, "I would." Her cottage in the snowlight was different from her cottage in the lamplight, quieter, the sounds of the village fully muffled, the world reduced to the space of this room and the fire and the gray-white light pressing through the small windows. The torn-eared wolf was back, stretched at the hearth again. She hung her cloak and set the basket on the work table and moved about the room with the complete ease of a woman in the only place she is entirely herself. She put the kettle on. I should tell you what I was thinking in those minutes. I was thinking, I have carried this seal for 107 years, and it has been silent in the presence of queens and daughters of bloodlines, and a woman who crossed the Dren Sea and every candidate my council has ever produced, and now it is blazing for a woman who put water out for wolves in a cold snap and kept a cracked mug because she loved it. I was thinking, my wolf knew. He waited the way he did because he already understood what I refused to believe, that the seal does not recognize ceremony or bloodline or performance. It recognizes something else. Something I did not have a word for and still do not, except possibly. She turned from the fire with 2 cups and set one in front of me, and the seal blazed white-hot, and the word I was reaching for was simply her. "You're very quiet," she said, sitting across from me. "I'm thinking," I said. "About?" I looked at her. I had been Corin the Elder for 11 days, and I was very tired of it, and I was also, and this I had not anticipated, afraid. Not of the reveal, of what came after the reveal, of what she would do with what came after. A king learns very early that people respond to the king, not to the man. She had been responding to the man. To old Corin, the unremarkable traveler who let her fix his walking stick and ate her neighbor's soup and walked through the snow without particular dignity. She did not know what I was. She had given me, without knowing she was giving it, the rarest thing I had encountered in a century of my life, the ease of being simply present. I was afraid that if I told her, it would end. My wolf did not share this concern. He pressed forward, steady and warm, and I understood that he had been waiting for this moment also, that in his way he had always known it would come to this place and this quiet and this moment of snowlight and tea, and that what I needed to do was not perform the reveal but simply tell the truth. "I owe you an honest account of myself," I said. She set her cup down. Something changed in her expression, not alarm, simply attention sharpened. "I am not a traveling elder," I said. "My name is not Corin, my name is Aldrich. I am the Alpha King of Valethorn." The fire cracked. The wolf at the hearth lifted his head. She looked at me. For a long moment she simply looked at me, and I watched her take it in, the way she took everything in with that complete attention, not performing a reaction but actually processing what she was hearing. Then she said, "The walking stick." "The injury was a pretext," I said. "The leg is real, an old wound from 20 years ago that troubles me in the cold, but I would not have gone to your cottage for it. I used it as a reason to meet you." "Why?" she said it simply, not with hurt, with the question. "Because I carry something that I have been carrying for 107 years. I reached into my cloak, and I lifted out the oilcloth bundle, and I set it on the table between us. And I needed to find the person it belongs to. I had tried every other way. This was the last way I could think of to walk away from the throne and all its ceremony and simply be a man in the world and see what I found. She looked at the bundle. What is it? A seal, an old binding, the pack that keeps a creature of great darkness pressed beneath the roots of the Varath Range, which runs behind these mountains. I paused, because there is no elegant way to say the next part. The pact requires a keeper, not a king, a woman the king's fated mate. The seal has been silent for 107 years because I had not found her. In your presence, in this village it has been, I stopped. It has been doing something it has never done before. Silence, the kettle breathed on the fire. May I see it? She asked. That is why I'm showing it to you, I said. She reached across the table. I did not move, did not help her, did not guide her. The seal needed to respond to her on its own terms without any assistance from me. Her fingers touched the oilcloth, unwrapped it with the care she brought to everything. The same steady hands that had wrapped my knee and repaired my walking stick and pressed a dressing to a wolf's ear. And the seal came free of its wrapping, and she looked at it, and then she reached out and she pressed her palm flat against its face. The room went white. Not blinding, not violent, simply white. The white of very early morning in deep winter, the white that precedes all color. The seal blazed silver beneath her hand, and the light came up through her fingers like heat rising from stone in summer. And from outside the cottage I heard the range wolves, all three of them, and others besides, a sound I had never heard directed at anything other than the moon, howl in clear, full chorus from the direction of the stone sheepfold. In my chest the bond ignited. There is no adequate description for this. I will try. It was as though something that had been sealed, not the relic, but something in me, something pressed beneath the years and the silence and the weight of carrying the unrequited thing, cracked open, not violently but with the inexorable finality of ice in spring. And through the crack came warmth, specific and total, not the warmth of the fire but warmth that had a shape, and the shape was her. My wolf stood fully upright for the first time in decades and simply breathed. She took her hand off the seal. She looked at her palm, she looked at me. What was that? She said, and it was not quite a question. The bond, I said. It means you are my fated mate, the mate I have been searching for. I held her gaze. I know that is a great deal to say to someone you have known for 3 days. She was quiet for a moment. The wolves outside had gone quiet again. The fire settled. She looked down at her palm again, then at the seal on the table, still faintly luminous, and then at me. You've been carrying that for 107 years, she said. Yes. Alone. Yes. She was quiet again, and I had no way to know what she was thinking. She was very private in her thinking, this woman. She did not let things cross her face until she had decided what she meant. And the silence stretched. And I sat with it and let it stretch. Because if I had learned one thing in 11 days in Threnwick, it was that she did not respond well to being pushed, and that the right thing to do with her was to let her reach her own conclusions in her own time. I told you I came here running from something, she said finally. Yes. I was in service to a lord in the Southern Holdings. She paused, choosing the words with precision. He decided my place in his household was not as a healer. I disagreed. I left before he could make the decision for me. She looked up from the seal and looked at me directly. I have been my own person for 3 years, in this village, in this cottage. I know, I said. That is what the seal saw. That is what I stopped, restarted. I am not here to ask you to be less than your own person. I am not in a position to offer you a cage and call it a throne. What I am offering you is another stop. I was unused to this. A king does not usually have to find words for things he has never said. I am offering you the truth of what this is, and I am asking you whether you are willing to know me. Know you, she repeated. Not the Alpha King, not what I am me, I paused. I would very much like to know you. The corner of her mouth moved. Not quite a smile, something more careful, more assessing, the expression of a woman who has learned to be precise about what she allows herself to hope for. You're still not very much like a king, she said. I have been pretending to be someone else for 11 days, I said. I may have got confused about which one I am. She looked at me for a long moment, and then she did something I had not expected. She laughed. A quiet laugh, brief and real, and it was, I do not have a better word for it, it was the best thing I had heard in a very long time. All right, Aldrich, she said. And she said my name, my actual name, with the same easy directness she used for everything. No ceremony, no performance, no adjustment of her manner to accommodate a king. Tell me something true about yourself that isn't about the seal. I thought about it. I kept a cracked mug for 15 years, I said. From the first morning I spent in Seldrath Keep after my father died. The tea in it tasted terrible and I poured it out and then I could not throw the mug away. She looked at me. Then she looked at the mantelpiece where her own cracked mug sat, the one she had clearly loved too much to part with. I see, she said, and her voice was softer than it had been. We talked until the snow stopped. I do not know the exact hour it ended. I know that the fire burned down once and she rebuilt it, and I helped carry wood in from the small stack outside the door, the cold air brief and sharp, and then the cottage warm again around us. I know that she told me about the goat and the herb stores in more detail than she had told it at lunch, and about the winter the mill race froze, and what it cost the village and what Perwick had organized so no one went without, and about the range wolf with the torn ear whose name, she informed me, was Aldous, because she had named him after the miller in a moment of what she described as poor judgment that had since become irreversible. I know that when she told me that, the laugh came out of me so suddenly that it startled the wolf at the hearth. And I know that at some point in the late afternoon, as the gray-white light from the windows shifted toward gray-blue and the day began to close, she said, "What happens now, with the seal?" "What happens is that you have a choice," I said. "The seal has found you. The bond is real. Neither of those things can be undone, but everything after, what you do with the knowledge, what you want, how slowly or quickly you come to any of it, those are yours." I looked at her steadily. "I am not going to appear in your village as the Alpha King of Valethorn and simply install you in my life without your consent. That is not what the bond is for, and it is not what I want." She turned her cup in her hands, looking down at it. "What do you want?" "A century of carrying something in silence teaches you the virtue of precision when precision is finally called for." "To know you," I said, "to give you time. To come back to Threnwick, or write you letters, or sit in this chair by your fire and talk about goats and cracked mugs and range wolves with bad ears. However it works, at whatever pace it works, until you know whether you want to come north. And if I decide I don't, then I will have spent the winter in the most honest conversation I've had in a very long time," I said. "And the seal will be stronger for having found you even if you stay here, and I will think of Threnwick every day for the rest of my life and consider it worth the walk." She was quiet for a long time. "That is a very long walk," she said. "I have a good walking stick," I said. "Someone repaired the ferrule." The corner of her mouth moved again, deeper this time, the careful thing becoming something warmer. She looked up from her cup and looked at me with those steady eyes that had been looking at things, and actually seeing them since the first moment she had opened her blue door, and she said, "Come to dinner tomorrow." "Yes," I said. "And Aldrich," she paused, "come as yourself." The seal rested against my ribs, warm and certain, and finally, after 107 years, at peace. I came to dinner as myself. I will not pretend that Threnwick was unimpressed by the distinction. Perwick had already begun to suspect, he told me later, with the satisfaction of a man who has kept many threads, that there was something about the way I held the walking stick that had troubled him from the beginning, a quality he described as not quite consistent with the sore leg. And when I came down from the upper room the following evening in my own clothes, my own bearing, without the bent-shouldered disguise of Corin the Elder, his face arranged itself into an expression of deep vindication. He said nothing. He handed me a cup of something warm and pointed toward the lane. The village learned, as villages do, by the end of that first proper dinner. Not from me, not from her. She was private about it in the way she was private about everything. But from the fact of who I was and how I moved, and from Osric, who arrived the morning after with 3 horses and a tight expression, having been tracking my progress through the mountain villages for 11 days, and having found me, as he said, in the last village he would have thought to look. "My lord," he said, in front of the blue door, with the tone of a man registering a formal but resigned objection to his king's general approach to things. "Osric," I said. "The council is managing without me," I said. "I'll be here 2 more days, possibly 3. He looked at the blue door, he looked at me. Something shifted in his expression, not surprise exactly, something older than surprise, like recognition. He said, "I see." Yes, I said. I'll stable the horses, he said, and went to find Perwick. She met Osric at dinner that evening. She shook his hand and asked him without ceremony whether he had eaten, and when he said not since morning, she made him sit down and put food in front of him with the same matter-of-fact competence with which she did everything. And I watched Osric, who had served my line for 3 generations, who had seen empresses and northern chieftains and negotiators from across the Dren Sea, eat his soup and say, after a moment, "You put out water for the range wolves." In the cold snap, yes, she said. It was a hard winter. Osric looked at me across the table. I looked at him. He looked at his soup and did not say anything else. I stayed 4 more days. I will not detail all of them, because some things belong to the 2 people in the room and not to the telling of the story. But I will say this. I stayed 4 more days, and in that time I walked through the snow to her cottage every morning and sat by her fire. And on the 2nd day, she showed me the herb stores the goat had demolished, and the new shelving she had built herself to replace the damaged one. And I helped her hang a new set of drying racks she had been putting off because the ceiling beam was too high, and she could not reach it alone. And on the 3rd evening, she came to the inn for dinner and sat with me and Osric and Perwick, and the 2 older women from the common table. And by the time we finished eating, someone had started calling me Aldrich without the formal address, and I had not corrected it. On the 4th day, the snow cleared. She came to the edge of the village to see me go. The 3 horses were packed. Osric was mounted. The range wolves were, characteristically, simply present nearby, including the torn-eared one whose name I had decided to remember as Aldous, because it was not precisely a dignified name for a wolf, but it was honest. She stood in the lane in her soft blue heeler's apron and her wool cloak, and she looked at me, and I looked at her, and the seal beneath my cloak rested against my ribs in steady, settled warmth. "I'll write," I said. "I'll write back," she said. "I'll come in the spring, or before if the pass clears." She nodded. There was something in her eyes that she had not decided yet whether to call what it was, and I did not press her to decide it. I had waited 107 years. I could wait for her to arrive at her own conclusions about what the warmth in her chest was, and what to do with it. I gathered my horse's reins. I was almost mounted when she said, "Aldrich." I looked back. "The mug," she said, "the cracked one in my cottage." She paused. "I've had it for 4 years. My mother gave it to me the morning I left home, and I dropped it on the road about 3 miles out, and it cracked, and I carried it the rest of the way because I couldn't leave it." She said it with the careful directness of someone offering something precisely, handing it across the space between them with both hands. "I thought you should know that." I did not say anything for a moment. Then I said, "I'm glad you carried it." She looked at me steadily, that measuring, actual-seeing look, and then she nodded once, and I turned my horse north. 3 months later, on the day the Varath Pass cleared early from an unexpected warm wind, I rode back into Threnwick not as Corin the Elder, and not as the Alpha King of Vailthorn riding in ceremony, but simply as Aldrich, arriving before the pass had been officially declared open, which Osric found characteristic. I tied my horse at Perwick's post and walked down the lane and knocked on the blue door. She opened it. She looked at me. There was something in her eyes that she had in 3 months apparently arrived at a conclusion about. "You're early," she said. "The pass cleared," I said. "I got your letter," she said. "All 7 of them." "I write when I am thinking about something," I said. I was thinking about something frequently. The corner of her mouth moved. Behind her, the wolf by the fire, Aldous, the torn-eared one, who had apparently taken up semi-permanent residence in her cottage, which I was privately glad about, lifted his head and regarded me with the expression of an animal that has made his peace with an arrangement. "Come in, then," she said. "Mind the step." I came in. I minded the step. I took the patient's chair by the fire, which I had come to think of as mine, and she put the kettle on, and the seal rested against my ribs in the steady warmth of something finally and completely home. She came north in the summer. Not immediately, and not because I pressed her. She spent 6 weeks arranging Threnwick, which meant, as I understood it from her letters, training a young woman from the village in the basics of what her cottage needed to continue functioning in her absence. Ensuring Aldous the wolf was properly integrated into the social life of the village in a way that would sustain itself, leaving Perwick with a written account of everything he needed to know about the Range Wolf Pack's current constitution. and writing a very detailed letter to Aldous the miller about the wolf also named Aldous, which she said she owed him. She arrived at Seldrath Keep on a clear morning in late summer with 2 bags, her healer's apron folded at the top of one of them, and the cracked mug carefully wrapped in cloth inside the other. My council, who had been managing me for a century and were experienced in the art of not showing what they felt, showed what they felt. Osric, who had been to Threnwick and had seen what there was to see, stood near the gate with the expression of a man who had been waiting a long time for something to come right, and was quietly satisfied to have been correct. She stood in the courtyard of Seldrath Keep in her wool cloak and looked up at the stone of it, at the height and the age and the permanence of it, and I stood beside her and watched her look, and I said, "It's a great deal of stone." "Yes," she said. "The fireplace in the main hall is larger than your cottage." "That seems unnecessary," she said. "It does," I agreed. "We can use the smaller room." She looked at me sideways. The corner of her mouth moved. "Aldrich," she said. "Yes." "Show me the herb stores." I showed her the herb stores, which were extensive and somewhat disorganized, a state of affairs she addressed over the following weeks with the same steady, unhurried competence she brought to everything. She met my council. She shook their hands and asked each of them, without ceremony, what they were currently most concerned about, and then listened to the answers with the complete attention of someone who was actually going to remember what she heard. My steward, a measured man who had never in 30 years of service expressed an opinion about my personal life, sought me out afterward and said, "My lord, she asked Councillor Wren about the border post supply situation." "Yes," I said. "Wren has been raising it in council for 2 seasons without resolution," he said. "I know," I said. "She resolved it," he said, "in about 12 minutes. "Yes," I said, "she tends to." The seal had been singing quietly ever since she set foot in Seldrath Keep, not blazing, not demanding, simply warm, the warmth of something that has found its rightful place and settled into it with the relief of long postponed rest. I had not known a sealed thing could feel like relief until it did. The formal acknowledgement, the ceremony the pack required, the moment of the claiming that would make her position recognized in Valethorn was, at her request, not elaborate. She had seen enough ceremony in her years in service to the Southern Lord to have developed a clear sense of what ceremony was for and what it was not for, and what she wanted, she said, was something honest. Something in front of the people who lived in Seldrath and the wolves that ran the range, not an occasion but a moment. It was late autumn, the first cold, the air the color of iron shavings, which I had come to understand as somehow her weather, the weather of the morning I had first seen her at the well, the morning that now organized itself around me as the beginning of things. The pack gathered in the outer courtyard. Osric stood to the left. The range wolves sat at the edges, which was where they preferred to be. She stood beside me. She was wearing a deep blue, the color of her healer's apron, which I suspected was not an accident, and she was looking at the gathered pack with the assessing, actually seeing look she brought to everything, and I was looking at her. I said what I meant and nothing more, which was that I had carried the seal for 107 years, and the seal had found its keeper in her, and that I had been looking for her longer than that, though I had not known I was looking until Threnwick, and that I intended to spend the rest of my life returning the favor in letter form, on the subject of goats, in the winter when the pass was deep, or in any form that was useful to her. The seal blazed silver as I spoke, and the wolves along the courtyard edge lifted their heads, and when I took her hand the bond moved through both of us, warm and final, and the pack fell silent. And then Osric, who had served 3 generations of my line and never once in my recollection initiated a gesture, began to bow, and the pack followed, and she stood in the cold morning light and looked out at all of them and did not look overwhelmed. She looked like what she was, a woman who had decided something and intended to follow through on it with the same steady competence she brought to everything else. She squeezed my hand. She did not perform it. She simply did it, the way she did everything, as if it were the expected and natural thing, and there were no reason to make a ceremony of it. Aldous the wolf, the range one, the torn-eared one, who had arrived at Seldrath Keep 3 days after she did. A migration I had simply incorporated into my understanding of how things were going to be, sat at the courtyard gate, and regarded the proceedings with the benevolent self-satisfaction of an animal whose opinion has been validated by events. I cannot tell you that nothing was difficult. I can tell you that difficulty with her had a different quality than difficulty alone. She brought her healer's steadiness to the border post supply questions, and to the council's concerns, and to the long dark of the Veilthorn winter, which was genuine, with wind that found every gap in the stone and nights that lasted. She put water out for the range wolves who came down from the mountain when it turned hard. She kept the cracked mug on the mantelpiece of the smaller room, which was the one we used. The hollowed god slept beneath the Verath range. The seal blazed warm, and in the mornings when I woke in Seldrath, keep and lay still for a moment before the day began. What I felt was not the weight of the century, and the silence, and the ache of the unrequited thing. What I felt was the specific warmth of her presence in the room, the quiet sounds of the cottage she was making of this place, the faint movement of the torn-eared wolf settling at the foot of the bed, and the seal, resting against my heart, at last and completely home.